The town of Willow Creek was usually a peaceful place. Kids rode their bikes down quiet streets, and neighbors waved hello over neatly trimmed lawns. But one sunny Tuesday morning, everything changed. Mr. Abernathy, the friendly baker who always had a smile and a free cookie for everyone, was found, gone. It wasn't a sickness, and it wasn't an accident. Something bad had happened. Very bad. The police arrived, their cars flashing red and blue. They put up yellow tape that said, "Police line do not cross." People whispered behind their hands. What could have happened to sweet Mr. Abernathy? Detective Miller, a tall man with kind eyes but a serious face, arrived on the scene. He looked around carefully, his brow furrowed. There were no signs of a struggle. No broken windows. No footprints in the flower beds. It was like Mr. Abernathy had simply vanished. The police asked everyone if they had seen or heard anything unusual. Had anyone seen a strange car? Had anyone heard a shout? But nobody had. It was as if a ghost had come and gone. There were no witnesses. And even more puzzling, there was no murder weapon. Nothing to tell them how Mr. Abernathy had been hurt. The police were stumped. This was going to be a very difficult case. It felt like trying to find a single grain of sand on a very big beach. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of Mr. Abernathy's death hung over Willow Creek like a dark cloud. Detective Miller and his team worked tirelessly, interviewing everyone who knew the baker. They checked his bakery, his house, his bank accounts, everything. But they found nothing that gave them a clue. "It's like he just vanished," sighed Officer Johnson, running a hand through his hair. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no weapon. And nobody saw anything. Detective Miller nodded grimly. That's what's so frustrating. It's a locked room mystery, but without the locked room. He stared at the evidence board, covered in photos and notes, all leading nowhere. They had followed every lead, chased every shadow, but the case remained stubbornly cold. The lack of witnesses was especially troubling. In a town like Willow Creek, someone usually saw something. A strange car, a suspicious person, anything out of the ordinary. But this time, nothing. It was as if the killer had been invisible. The police were beginning to feel the pressure. The townspeople were scared, and they wanted answers. Detective Miller knew he had to find something, anything, to break the case open. But where do you start when you have absolutely nothing? Just when Detective Miller was starting to feel hopeless, a new possibility emerged. Mrs. Davis, who lived across the street from Mr. Abernathy, was known in the neighborhood for two things: her prize-winning roses and her love of all things technology. Her house was filled with computers, gadgets, and blinking lights. She even had a small drone she used to check on her garden. Mrs. Davis wasn't nosy, but she believed in being prepared. That's why she had installed security cameras around her house. They weren't fancy, but they recorded everything that happened on her street. Detective Miller had almost overlooked her. He thought the cameras were just for watching squirrels. He remembered seeing her tending her roses one afternoon, a small tablet in her hand. "Mrs. Davis," he recalled saying, "did you happen to see anything unusual the morning Mr. Abernathy passed?" She had shaken her head sadly. "No, Detective. I was inside, working on my computer. I wish I had seen something. Mr. Abernathy was such a kind man." But now, Detective Miller wondered. What about those cameras? Even if Mrs. Davis hadn't seen anything, maybe her cameras had. It was a long shot, but at this point, they had nothing to lose. He decided to pay Mrs. Davis another visit, hoping her love of technology might be the key to unlocking the mystery of Mr. Abernathy's death. When Detective Miller arrived at Mrs. Davis's house, he was greeted by the scent of roses and the gentle whirring of computer fans. Mrs. Davis, a woman with bright eyes and a friendly smile, ushered him inside. Her living room was a fascinating mix of floral patterns and high-tech gadgets. Wires snaked around potted plants, and a large monitor displayed complex graphs and charts. "Detective Miller, it's good to see you again," she said, offering him a glass of iced tea. "I've been thinking about Mr. Abernathy. It's just terrible." "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," Detective Miller replied, accepting the tea. "I was wondering if you might be willing to check your security camera footage from that morning. We're still trying to piece together what happened." Mrs. Davis nodded. "Of course, Detective. I'll do anything I can to help. The cameras record everything, but they aren't the highest quality, I'm afraid. Still, let's take a look." She led him to a small room filled with computer equipment. With a few clicks of the mouse, she pulled up the footage from the morning of Mr. Abernathy's death. They watched together, their eyes glued to the screen. Cars drove by, squirrels scampered across the lawn, and the mailman delivered the mail. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. After an hour of watching, Detective Miller was starting to lose hope. The footage was grainy and unclear. It was hard to see anything in detail. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Davis," he said, trying to hide his disappointment. "I appreciate you letting us look." "Wait, Detective," Mrs. Davis said suddenly, pointing to the screen. "Rewind that just a bit. There, see that car?" A dark sedan sped past Mr. Abernathy's house around the time of the incident. It was blurry and hard to make out, but it was definitely a car. "It's going pretty fast," she observed. "Faster than the usual traffic on this street." Could this be their first real lead? Detective Miller leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowed. "Can you zoom in on that car, Mrs. Davis?" he asked, his voice filled with cautious hope. Mrs. Davis expertly manipulated the controls, zooming in on the image of the dark sedan. But as they zoomed in, the picture became even blurrier. The car was now just a pixelated blob, its details completely lost. "Darn," Mrs. Davis said, frowning. "The resolution isn't good enough. I can't make out the license plate, or even the make and model of the car." Detective Miller sighed, his shoulders slumping. It was always the same. A glimmer of hope, quickly extinguished by the frustrating lack of clear evidence. "Well, it was worth a try," he said, trying to sound optimistic. "At least we know a car was in the area." "But Detective," Mrs. Davis said, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I recently downloaded some new video enhancement software. It's supposed to be able to sharpen blurry images and bring out details that you normally can't see. I haven't really had a chance to play around with it yet, but maybe it could help us with this footage." Detective Miller's eyes widened. Video enhancement software. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. But if it could actually work, it could be the breakthrough they needed. "Mrs. Davis," he said, his voice filled with renewed hope, "that sounds incredible. Would you be willing to try it?" Mrs. Davis smiled. "Detective, I'd be delighted. Let's see if we can turn this blurry mess into something useful." The blurry footage showed a dark shape speeding down the street. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was, let alone read the license plate. The image was filled with fuzzy pixels, like a poorly drawn picture. It was hard to believe anything useful could be extracted from such a mess. The car seemed to almost melt into the background, a dark blur against the lighter street. It was there and gone in a flash. Detective Miller watched as Mrs. Davis worked, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Lines of code appeared on the screen, and the blurry image flickered and changed. It was like watching a magician at work. He didn't understand exactly what she was doing, but he could see that she was carefully adjusting the settings, trying to sharpen the image and bring out the hidden details. "This software is pretty amazing," Mrs. Davis explained, without taking her eyes off the screen. "It uses complex algorithms to analyze the image and fill in the missing information. It's like it's guessing what the image should look like, based on what it can see." Detective Miller was amazed. It was like the software was a detective itself, piecing together clues to solve a visual puzzle. He held his breath, hoping that Mrs. Davis and her magical software could pull a rabbit out of a hat, or, in this case, a license plate out of a blurry blob. The fate of the Abernathy case, and the peace of Willow Creek, might just depend on it. Mrs. Davis knew this software was powerful. She had seen it work wonders on old family photos, bringing out details that had been lost for decades. She remembered one picture of her grandmother as a young girl, the face faded and almost gone. The software had somehow filled in the gaps, recreating her grandmother's smile and the sparkle in her eyes. It felt like bringing her back to life. That's why, even though the security footage was incredibly blurry, Mrs. Davis felt a surge of hope. She knew this software was capable of doing amazing things. She started experimenting with different settings, carefully adjusting the brightness, contrast, and sharpness. It was a slow and painstaking process. Each adjustment took time, and she had to wait for the software to process the changes. Detective Miller watched patiently, sipping his now cold iced tea. He knew that Mrs. Davis was doing everything she could. He could see the concentration on her face, the way her brow furrowed as she focused on the screen. He tried to imagine what it must be like to work with such complex technology. It was like speaking a different language, a language of code and algorithms. He was grateful that Mrs. Davis had this skill, and that she was willing to use it to help solve Mr. Abernathy's case. He knew that without her, they would still be stuck in the dark, with nothing but a blurry image and a growing sense of despair. Imagine you have a drawing that's been smudged. That's kind of what the blurry video looked like. Video enhancement is like carefully erasing the smudges and redrawing the lines to make the picture clearer. One of the things Mrs. Davis did was sharpen the image. Think of it like using a really fine-tipped pencil to outline everything. Sharpening makes the edges of things look more defined, so you can see them better. It's like making the blurry lines bolder and easier to see. Another thing she adjusted was the contrast. Contrast is the difference between the light and dark parts of the picture. If the contrast is too low, everything looks gray and washed out. If the contrast is too high, the dark parts are too dark, and the light parts are too bright. Mrs. Davis carefully adjusted the contrast to make the different parts of the car stand out from the background. It's like turning up the lights so you can see the shadows better. She also used tools that reduced noise. Noise is like the static you see on an old TV. It's random little dots and specks that make the picture look messy. The software helped to smooth out the noise, making the image cleaner and easier to see. It was a lot like putting together a puzzle, only instead of puzzle pieces, Mrs. Davis was using computer tools to rebuild the blurry picture, one tiny adjustment at a time. Hours passed, filled with the hum of the computer and the click of the mouse. Detective Miller stretched and yawned, trying to stay awake. Mrs. Davis, fueled by coffee and determination, continued to tweak and adjust the image. The blurry car remained stubbornly unclear, but with each small adjustment, it seemed to get a little bit better. Finally, as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, Mrs. Davis let out a gasp. "Detective, I think I've got something." She zoomed in on the license plate area. It was still fuzzy, but now, instead of just a blur of white, they could see a few distinct shapes. It wasn't the whole license plate, but they could make out 3 numbers and 1 letter, 4, 7. G2. Detective Miller's heart leaped with excitement. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was the first solid clue they had in weeks. "Mrs. Davis, you're a miracle worker," he exclaimed, his voice filled with gratitude. "This is incredible." Mrs. Davis smiled, her face tired but triumphant. "It wasn't easy," she said, "but I'm glad I could help. I just hope it's enough to catch whoever did this to Mr. Abernathy." Detective Miller was sure of it. With this partial license plate, they finally had something to work with. They could narrow down the list of possible vehicles and start to close in on the killer. The blurry image had finally yielded its secret, thanks to Mrs. Davis's skill and determination. The game was afoot. Detective Miller, barely containing his excitement, practically leaped out of his chair. "I need to get this information back to the station right away," he exclaimed. "We can run that partial plate and see what we come up with." He thanked Mrs. Davis profusely, promising to keep her updated on the progress of the investigation. As he hurried out the door, he could hear Mrs. Davis already on the phone, calling the police station to report her discovery. "This is Mrs. Davis," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I've enhanced the video footage from my security camera, and I've managed to get part of the license plate number of that car that was speeding past Mr. Abernathy's house. It's 47G2. I hope this helps." The dispatcher on the other end of the line, who had been fielding calls about missing cats and noisy neighbors all morning, suddenly perked up. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," she said, her voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. "This is exactly the kind of information we need. I'll pass it on to Detective Miller right away." Back at the police station, the atmosphere was buzzing with renewed energy. The partial license plate number had given everyone a much-needed boost of hope. It was like a light had been switched on in a dark room. They finally had a direction to go in, a puzzle piece to build upon. The hunt for Mr. Abernathy's killer was back on. Back at the police station, the computer whirred as Officer Johnson typed the partial license plate number into the database. He added information about the car's color, dark, and type, sedan, based on what they could see in the enhanced footage. The computer spat out a list of possible vehicles, dozens of cars registered in the surrounding area that matched the limited information they had. It was still a long list, but it was much shorter than the list of every car in the county. Detective Miller gathered his team. "Okay, everyone," he said, spreading the list out on the table. "We need to go through this list carefully. Check the owners of these vehicles. See if any of them have a connection to Mr. Abernathy. Look for anything suspicious." The team divided up the list, each officer taking a section to investigate. They checked addresses, phone numbers, and criminal records. They looked for any reason why someone on this list might have wanted to harm Mr. Abernathy. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but now, at least, they knew which haystack to search. The partial license plate had given them a focus, a starting point. They were no longer wandering in the dark. They had a glimmer of hope, thanks to Mrs. Davis and her amazing technology. The hunt was on, and they were determined to find Mr. Abernathy's killer. Detective Miller wasn't just any detective. He was known for his dedication and his ability to solve even the most difficult cases. He had a knack for noticing small details that others missed, and he never gave up, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. He felt a personal responsibility to find Mr. Abernathy's killer. Mr. Abernathy had been a pillar of the community, a kind and generous man who had always been there for others. Detective Miller felt like he owed it to Mr. Abernathy, and to the people of Willow Creek, to bring the person responsible to justice. He pored over the list of potential vehicles, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read each name and address carefully, searching for anything that seemed out of place. He spent hours on the phone, calling people, asking questions, piecing together the puzzle one small piece at a time. He knew that time was of the essence. The longer the killer remained free, the greater the risk that they would strike again. He had to find them, and he had to find them quickly. He was determined to use every resource at his disposal, every skill he possessed, to bring Mr. Abernathy's killer to justice. He would not rest until the case was solved and the people of Willow Creek could feel safe again. He felt the weight of the town's expectations on his shoulders, and he was determined not to let them down. Detective Miller decided to focus his attention on the cars that most closely matched the description from the enhanced video. Dark sedans with license plates containing the numbers 4, 7, G, and 2 in any order were his priority. He knew that the order of the numbers and letters might be different, but those 4 characters were the key. He created a smaller list, highlighting the vehicles that fit the criteria. He then began to delve deeper into the backgrounds of the owners of those vehicles. He checked their alibis for the morning of Mr. Abernathy's death. He looked for any connections they might have had to the baker. He even drove past their houses, observing their cars and their behavior. One name kept popping up, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson owned a dark sedan, and his license plate contained the numbers 4 and 7, and the letter G, although not in the exact order they had seen in the video. He also lived only a few blocks away from Mr. Abernathy. Detective Miller decided to pay Mr. Johnson a visit. He wanted to get a feel for the man, to see if anything seemed off. He knew that it was just a hunch, but sometimes, a detective had to trust their instincts. He had a feeling that Mr. Johnson might be more than just a name on a list. He might be the key to solving the mystery of Mr. Abernathy's death. The hunch felt strong. When Detective Miller arrived at Mr. Johnson's house, he noticed that the dark sedan parked in the driveway looked exactly like the car in the enhanced video. It was the same color, the same make and model. Even the license plate, with its familiar numbers and letter, sent a shiver down his spine. Mr. Johnson answered the door, his face pale and drawn. He seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact. Detective Miller introduced himself and asked if he could ask Mr. Johnson a few questions about Mr. Abernathy's death. Mr. Johnson hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly agreed to let Detective Miller inside. The house was dark and cluttered, filled with a strange, musty smell. Mr. Johnson fidgeted as Detective Miller asked him about his relationship with Mr. Abernathy and his whereabouts on the morning of the baker's death. Mr. Johnson claimed that he barely knew Mr. Abernathy and that he had been at home all morning, sick with a cold. But Detective Miller noticed that Mr. Johnson's hands were trembling, and his voice was shaky. Something about his story didn't add up. As Detective Miller continued to ask questions, Mr. Johnson became increasingly agitated. He started to sweat, and his breathing became rapid. Detective Miller knew that he was getting closer to the truth. He could feel it in his gut. Mr. Johnson was their prime suspect. It was now a matter of finding the evidence to prove it. Back at the station, Detective Miller ordered a full background check on Mr. Johnson. The results came back quickly, and they painted a troubling picture. Mr. Johnson had a history of financial problems and a previous arrest for assault. But what really caught Detective Miller's eye was a connection to Mr. Abernathy. Years ago, Mr. Johnson had taken out a large loan to start a business. Mr. Abernathy, known for his generosity, had co-signed the loan. Unfortunately, Mr. Johnson's business had failed, leaving him deeply in debt. Mr. Abernathy had been forced to pay back the loan, putting a strain on his own finances. Detective Miller learned that Mr. Abernathy had recently started legal proceedings to recover the money he had lost. This gave Mr. Johnson a clear motive for wanting Mr. Abernathy out of the picture. With Mr. Abernathy gone, the legal proceedings would likely be dropped, and Mr. Johnson would be off the hook. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The speeding car, the partial license plate, Mr. Johnson's nervous behavior, and now, a clear motive. Detective Miller knew he had his man. It was time to bring Mr. Johnson in for questioning and see if he would crack under pressure. He felt confident that the truth would finally come out. The net was closing in. 2 uniformed officers arrived at Mr. Johnson's house and escorted him to the police station. He looked even more pale and nervous than before, his eyes darting around as if he were searching for an escape. In the interrogation room, Detective Miller sat across from Mr. Johnson, the enhanced video footage and the background check documents spread out on the table between them. The room was small and sterile, with bright overhead lights that seemed to amplify Mr. Johnson's anxiety. Detective Miller began the questioning calmly, asking Mr. Johnson about his relationship with Mr. Abernathy and his whereabouts on the morning of the murder. Mr. Johnson repeated his previous story, claiming that he had been at home sick and that he barely knew the baker. But Detective Miller wasn't buying it. He knew that Mr. Johnson was lying. He could see it in his eyes, in the way he fidgeted in his chair, in the way he avoided direct answers. Mr. Johnson, Detective Miller said, his voice firm but respectful, we have evidence that suggests you weren't being entirely truthful with us. We know about your financial problems, and we know about the loan that Mr. Abernathy co-signed. We also have video footage of a car matching yours speeding away from Mr. Abernathy's house on the morning of his death. Mr. Johnson's face turned ashen. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. The game was up. He knew that Detective Miller had him cornered. The truth was about to come out. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Mr. Johnson stubbornly maintained his innocence. "I didn't do anything," he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "I swear, I was homesick all day. That car in the video, it wasn't me. It could have been anyone." Detective Miller remained calm, his eyes fixed on Mr. Johnson's. He knew that breaking a suspect required patience and persistence. "Mr. Johnson," he said softly, "we know you were having financial problems. We know that Mr. Abernathy was trying to recover the money you owed him. And we know that your car was seen speeding away from his house on the morning he died. All the evidence points to you. It's a coincidence." Mr. Johnson cried, his voice cracking. "I didn't kill Mr. Abernathy. I would never do something like that." Detective Miller sighed. He had expected this. Criminals rarely confessed easily. He knew he would have to push harder, to present the evidence in a way that would leave Mr. Johnson no room to deny the truth. He was determined to get a confession, not just for himself, but for Mr. Abernathy and the people of Willow Creek. He had come too far to give up now. The interrogation was just beginning. Detective Miller leaned forward and pressed a button on the DVD player. The enhanced video footage flickered to life on the small screen in the interrogation room. It showed Mr. Johnson's dark sedan speeding down the street in front of Mr. Abernathy's house on the morning of the baker's death. The image was still somewhat grainy, but it was clear enough to make out the car's make and model, and the partial license plate number was unmistakable. It was Mr. Johnson's car. There was no denying it. Detective Miller paused the video and turned to Mr. Johnson, his eyes boring into his. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice low and steady, "this is your car, isn't it? And this video was taken on the morning Mr. Abernathy died. Can you explain to me what your car was doing near Mr. Abernathy's house at that time?" Mr. Johnson stared at the screen, his mouth agape. The color drained from his face, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen in fear. The enhanced video footage had finally broken him. He knew that his lies were no longer believable. The truth was about to be revealed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Detective Miller waited patiently, knowing that Mr. Johnson was on the verge of confessing. The silence stretched on, broken only by Mr. Johnson's ragged breathing. I can explain," Mr. Johnson stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I needed to borrow some sugar from Mr. Abernathy. I was baking a cake." Detective Miller raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. "Sugar, Mr. Johnson? At 6 o'clock in the morning? And why were you speeding away from his house?" Mr. Johnson's story began to unravel like a cheap sweater. He stammered and stuttered, trying to come up with a believable explanation, but his words were jumbled and incoherent. He claimed that he had been in a hurry because his cake was burning, but Detective Miller pointed out that the video showed him speeding in the opposite direction of his house. Mr. Johnson's face was now slick with sweat, and his hands were shaking so badly that he could barely keep them still. He knew that his lies were falling apart, and he was desperately trying to salvage the situation, but it was no use. The enhanced video footage had sealed his fate. He started changing his story, first saying he was borrowing sugar, then saying he was just driving by, then claiming he didn't even remember being there. Each new explanation was more absurd than the last. Detective Miller watched patiently, letting Mr. Johnson dig himself deeper and deeper into a hole. The truth was about to surface, and when it did, it would be undeniable. The flimsy wall he had built around his lies was crumbling. As Mr. Johnson's story fell apart, the police were busy gathering more evidence. They had obtained a warrant to search Mr. Johnson's house and his car. The search turned up something that sealed Mr. Johnson's fate. Inside Mr. Johnson's car, under the driver's seat, they found tiny blue fibers. These fibers were sent to the lab for analysis, and the results came back quickly. The fibers were a perfect match to the fabric of Mr. Abernathy's favorite blue sweater, the one he always wore when he was baking. Detective Miller returned to the interrogation room, a small plastic bag containing the blue fibers in his hand. He placed the bag on the table in front of Mr. Johnson. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice cold and hard, "we found these in your car. They're fibers from Mr. Abernathy's blue sweater. Can you explain how they got there?" Mr. Johnson stared at the bag, his eyes wide with terror. He knew that there was no escaping now. The evidence was overwhelming. He had been caught red-handed. The game was over. He slumped back in his chair, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The truth was about to come spilling out. He couldn't run anymore. He couldn't hide anymore. He was trapped. The dam finally broke. Tears streamed down Mr. Johnson's face as he confessed to killing Mr. Abernathy. He explained that he had been desperate, overwhelmed by debt and facing financial ruin. He had seen Mr. Abernathy as his last hope, but when the baker refused to drop the legal proceedings, Mr. Johnson had snapped. He admitted that he had gone to Mr. Abernathy's house that morning to plead with him one last time. But when Mr. Abernathy had remained firm, an argument had erupted, and in a moment of blind rage, Mr. Johnson had done something terrible. He didn't go into details, but it was clear that he regretted his actions. He explained that he had panicked after killing Mr. Abernathy and had sped away from the scene, hoping to escape before anyone saw him. He had never imagined that a blurry video from a neighbor's security camera could be used to track him down. Detective Miller listened patiently as Mr. Johnson recounted his story, his face etched with remorse. He knew that Mr. Johnson's confession wouldn't bring Mr. Abernathy back, but it would bring closure to the community and ensure that justice was served. The truth was finally out in the open, and the healing could begin. The long nightmare was over. News of Mr. Johnson's confession spread quickly through Willow Creek, bringing a wave of relief to the shaken community. People hugged each other in the streets, tears of sadness mixed with tears of relief. The cloud of fear that had hung over the town for weeks finally began to dissipate. "I can't believe it was Mr. Johnson," said Mrs. Peterson, a neighbor of Mr. Abernathy. "He always seemed like such a quiet, unassuming man." "It just goes to show you," replied Mr. Henderson, another neighbor, "you never really know what's going on inside someone's head." The townspeople gathered at Mr. Abernathy's bakery, leaving flowers and candles in his memory. They shared stories about his kindness and generosity, remembering the free cookies he always gave to children and the warm smile he always had for everyone. The arrest of Mr. Johnson didn't bring Mr. Abernathy back, but it did bring a sense of closure to the community. They knew that justice would be served, and that Mr. Abernathy's memory would live on in their hearts. The dark chapter in Willow Creek's history was finally coming to an end, and the town could begin to heal. The nightmare was finally over. They could start to feel safe again. The tension eased. Mrs. Davis became an instant local hero. The townspeople showered her with praise and gratitude, recognizing that her technological skills and quick thinking had been instrumental in solving the case. She received bouquets of roses, thank-you notes, and even a key to the city. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about her, hailing her as the tech-savvy neighbor who solved the Abernathy murder. People stopped her on the street to thank her, and children asked for her autograph. Mrs. Davis, however, remained humble. She insisted that she had simply done what any good neighbor would have done. She was grateful that her technology had been able to help, but she also recognized the hard work and dedication of Detective Miller and the entire police department. The town held a special ceremony in her honor, where she was presented with an award for her outstanding service to the community. In her acceptance speech, Mrs. Davis encouraged everyone to embrace technology and use it for good. "Technology can be a powerful tool for solving problems and making our communities safer," she said. "We just need to learn how to use it responsibly and effectively." She smiled. It was a good feeling, being able to help. She would continue to use her skills for good. It was the least she could do. The story of Mr. Abernathy's murder and its resolution highlighted the growing importance of technology in solving crimes and keeping communities safe. Security cameras, video enhancement software, and computer databases were all crucial in bringing Mr. Johnson to justice. In the past, a case like this, with no witnesses and no obvious murder weapon, might have gone cold. But thanks to technology, the police were able to piece together the puzzle and find the killer. The case also demonstrated the power of citizen involvement in crime solving. Mrs. Davis wasn't a police officer or a detective, but her technological skills and her willingness to help had made all the difference. It was a reminder that everyone has a role to play in keeping their communities safe. Whether it's installing security cameras, learning about technology, or simply being vigilant and reporting suspicious activity, every little bit helps. The story of Willow Creek showed that even in the face of tragedy, technology and community spirit could come together to bring about justice and healing. The power of technology is amazing. It can help people in many ways. This time, it helped catch a killer. Weeks after Mr. Johnson's conviction, Detective Miller found himself reflecting on the case. He sat in his office, staring at the enhanced video footage on his computer screen. It was still a bit blurry, but it was enough. He thought about how a seemingly small piece of evidence, a blurry image of a speeding car, had made all the difference. Without Mrs. Davis's technological skills and her willingness to help, the case might have remained unsolved. He also realized the importance of community involvement in solving crimes. Mrs. Davis wasn't a police officer, but she had played a crucial role in bringing Mr. Abernathy's killer to justice. He learned that every piece of information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, could be a key to unlocking a mystery. And he learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, as long as people are willing to work together and use their skills to help others. He smiled, thinking about Mrs. Davis and her roses. He decided to visit her and thank her again for her help. He knew that the people of Willow Creek would never forget her, and neither would he. He learned a lot from this case. Never underestimate the power of a caring neighbor. They can make all the difference. This was a case he would never forget. The story of Willow Creek serves as a reminder to us all: be vigilant, pay attention to your surroundings, and help your neighbors. You never know when a seemingly small act of kindness or observation might make all the difference. Install security cameras if you can, learn about technology, and be willing to share your knowledge and skills with others. But most importantly, be a good neighbor. Look out for one another, offer a helping hand, and create a community where everyone feels safe and supported. If you see something suspicious, don't hesitate to report it to the police. Your call could be the one that prevents a crime or helps to solve one. Remember, we are all in this together. By working together, we can create safer, more vibrant, and more caring communities for ourselves and for future generations. Be a part of the solution. Be vigilant. Help your neighbors. You might just be the hero that your community needs. Every little bit helps. Even a small act can make a big difference. So, be kind, be helpful, and be aware. The world will be a better place because of it.